I lost my parents very young. They died in a car accident when I was just 2 years old. I was adopted by my maternal aunt, Hema, my mother's older sister. In fact, Hema didn't have much affection for Elena, my mother. Her younger sister was beautiful and refined, always attracting many admirers. One day, in a cafe, she met a tall, handsome man called Victor. He was a traveler. Victor invited her to see a new movie about a trip around the world in a hot air balloon. The young couple had a great time, and the movie left a big impression on them. Victor turned out to be a sweet and interesting conversationalist. He knew so much, he had been to so many places. Elena excitedly told Hema about her new acquaintance. "He's not the right guy for you," Hema retorted, practical. "Just a reckless drifter, he'll dazzle you and then leave you." However, Elena didn't listen to her sister. She continued to watch Victor. The young couple fell in love and married just 3 months later. Hema considered this decision more than frivolous and did not approve of her sister's marriage. Victor couldn't sit still and took his wife everywhere with him. They traveled all over the country and occasionally abroad. Hema found this lifestyle strange. She was used to staying in one place, looking after the house and garden and raising children. When I was born, Hema thought everything would change, but my parents continued to travel, leaving me with a nanny. When the car accident happened, Hema had no choice but to take me in. She already had 4 children, so I became the 5th child in the family. Of course, Hema, who carried the weight of the whole house on her shoulders, couldn't devote much time to me, and she really didn't want to. "We have enough problems," Hema grumbled. She should be grateful that we took her in and didn't send her to an orphanage. Hema's children didn't welcome me. They didn't want to share their toys or let me join in their games. The older cousins teased me, calling me a poor orphan. I cried constantly, missing my parents so much. Every morning, I would climb onto the windowsill in the living room, holding the teddy bear my deceased parents had given me, and hide behind the thick curtains, looking out of the window in complete solitude. Fortunately, a significant event soon occurred in Xavier's family, changing my life for the better. The elderly father moved in with his daughter. Until then, Grandpa Aurelio had lived in the village, but it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to look after himself, so Hema decided to bring him to live with them. Grandpa Aurelio was housed in a separate wing of the house, accessible from the garden. Hema made sure that her father had access to the kitchen and 2 bedrooms, one for sleeping and one for his workshop. Grandpa Aurelio had been a farmer all his life, but in his spare time he liked to create elegant figures out of wood and plaster. He still devoted himself to his favorite hobby, in which he put his soul, after the death of my mother and Hema's mother. Creativity became the old man's only solace. With the arrival of Grandpa Aurelio in my life, a ray of light shone through. From our first meeting, I felt a deep trust in the old man. All the children loved him for his kindness and cheerful disposition. When he saw me for the first time, Grandpa Aurelio called me over and asked me to hold out my hand. I obeyed and was delighted to find a little plaster kitten in my hand. "How adorable!" I exclaimed, quickly hiding the present in my pocket for fear that my cousins would take it. Grandpa Aurelio frowned, sensing my fear. He understood that the older children mistreated me. "This little girl needs love and care," he decided. Grandpa Aurelio allowed me to come to his workshop whenever I wanted. "I'll always be happy to see you," he said with a gentle smile, and so I began to visit my grandfather every day. Grandpa Aurelio would read books to me, take me for walks in the park, and let me help him with his figures. I learned to work with plaster, and the time spent in Grandpa Aurelio's workshop became one of the happiest memories of my childhood. As I got older, my relationship with the Xavier family got worse. My cousins continued to be rude to me, ignoring me completely. Hema picked on me for every little thing, even my choice of clothes. Once, when I was 14, I wanted to rearrange my room, but Hema wouldn't let me. "As long as you live under this roof, I decide how the furniture is arranged," she said. I was on the verge of tears from the insult. "But Auntie, it's my room and I'm the only one who lives in it," I protested. Hema frowned. "There's nothing here that belongs to you, remember that?" she replied coldly. The cousins, sitting at the kitchen table drinking cocoa, laughed. "Because you're a poor orphan," said one of them. "Don't forget that," added another. Instead of scolding the children, Hema remained silent. I ran out of the kitchen, barely holding back my tears. I knew that the only place where I would be understood was Grandpa Aurelio's workshop. I ran into the spacious living room lit by the bright sun, tears streaming down my face. "What happened, dear?" asked Grandpa, alarmed. I sat on the edge of a chair, buried my face in my hands, and cried out loud. "They hate me, Grandpa. Maybe I'd be better off living in an orphanage than putting up with this. I can't take it anymore." Grandpa Aurelio pulled up a chair and sat down next to me. "If you were in an orphanage now, who would help me make sculptures?" he asked affectionately. I wiped away my tears. "You're right, Grandpa," I smiled. When I started helping the old man, his sculptures became even more graceful and unusual. I put my heart, soul, and imagination into the work. Grandpa Aurelio often said that I had a natural talent for noticing and creating beauty. "You have an innate gift for noticing and creating beauty," he used to say. "When you grow up, you could become a famous artist." I just laughed shyly in response. "Oh no, Grandpa. It's your magic hands that create all the beauty. I'm just your helper." Deep down, however, I was terribly proud of Grandpa Aurelio's compliment. One day, I suggested to the old man that we paint some of the sculptures with colors. Grandpa Aurelio thought it was a great idea. We went into town together and bought everything we needed for our creativity: acrylic paints, brushes, and a palette. As soon as we got back, I got to work. We worked in the workshop until late at night, and we were both satisfied with the work we had done. The plaster figures made by Grandpa and painted by me had taken on a new life. "Grandpa, what if we sold them at the school fair?" I suggested. Grandpa Aurelio thought for a moment. "I've never sold my work before, but why not?" He finally smiled. I clapped and hugged him. Our figures sold like water and became a real success. I was happy, and Grandpa Aurelio was delighted to see me like this. Years passed, and it was time to choose what to do after school. "I really want to continue studying," I confessed. "You should study to become an artist," said my grandfather. I looked at him doubtfully. "Are you sure? If Auntie and the cousins find out, they'll laugh at my intention immediately." "The poor orphan wants to become an artist. What a joke," I said bitterly. But Grandpa Aurelio shook his head. "You need to learn to feel your worth, regardless of the opinions and actions of others," he said wisely. "Do what your heart whispers. It's never wrong." I nodded. "Okay, Grandpa, I'll try," I promised. I began to spend all my time studying. Finally, it was time to take the exams. I was very nervous, but Grandpa Aurelio supported me through everything. He suggested taking photos of our work together and showing them to the teachers. "I'm sure it will be a big plus point for your results," he said decisively. I agreed. A month later, I received a letter from the university saying that I had been accepted into the first year of the art course, and it was also mentioned that all the members of the committee really liked my work. "Grandpa, I passed," I exclaimed, running to the workshop. Grandpa Aurelio was delighted. "We need to celebrate this," he said. "Get ready, we're going to a restaurant." I couldn't believe my ears. "But it's very expensive," I smiled. "But the occasion is worth it, and besides, I've wanted to see you in a nice dress for a long time." I thought for a moment. "But Grandpa, I don't have any nice dresses," I admitted honestly. "Is Haima so stingy that she hasn't bought you a single outfit for special occasions?" frowned the old man. "All the money goes to the kids," I shrugged. Grandpa Aurelio paused for a moment, then his wrinkled face lit up. "So let's stop at a fashion store before the restaurant," he announced. No objections accepted. I had to agree, and I didn't regret it. For the first time, I was able to choose a dress for myself. I found it immediately. Light pink with puffed sleeves and a flowing skirt. Grandpa Aurelio was delighted to see me in my new outfit. "You look magnificent," he said sincerely. "You're so beautiful that all the boys at university will run after you, but don't let them get too close. You need to study, and you might get married later." I laughed and nodded. "Okay, Grandpa." We had a wonderful evening together. Everything seemed magical to me. I knew that this restaurant, my dress, and Grandpa Aurelio's kind, slightly flushed face would stay in my memory forever. When the Xavier family heard that I had been accepted to university, they couldn't believe their ears. "How dare you hide this from me?" Hima was angry. "Ungrateful girl." I blushed. "Auntie, I didn't want to hide anything from you. I just didn't know if it would work out or not, and I didn't want to say anything prematurely. But Hima was relentless. Since you've been accepted at university, you're now considered an adult and independent. You no longer have anything to do in our house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you kicking me out? Hima crossed her arms over her chest and gave me a hostile look. The university should provide accommodation in the dormitory. You can move there. It's time to look after yourself. And don't you dare complain to Grandpa Aurelio. Tell him you've decided to move out on your own. He's too old to worry about you. With those words, Hima left the room with a face of stone. I thought my aunt was right. There was no need to involve Grandpa. Perhaps my move was the best solution for everyone. After all, I could always visit my beloved grandfather and continue our work together. Surely no one would dare forbid me that. The next day, I went to the university and asked about the dormitory. I was told that I could be offered a place in one of the girls' rooms. I returned home and, without wasting any time, began to pack my things. I discovered that I had very few. I carefully packed the pink dress that Grandpa Aurelio had given me, folded jeans, t-shirts, and sweatshirts, a few books, and a soft teddy bear that my parents had bought me a long time ago. Then I went with my luggage to Grandpa Aurelio's workshop. When he saw me with my things, he was very surprised. I explained that I had been offered a place in the student dormitory and decided that living there would be more convenient for me. The dormitory is only a 5-minute walk from the main campus. I'll be very comfortable there. Besides, I'll make friends with other girls and finally have friends, I explained. Grandpa Aurelio smiled. Then it's the best decision, he replied. But I'll miss you terribly, my dear granddaughter. I saw tears in the old man's eyes and hugged him tightly. I'll visit you often and will continue to work on new sculptures and figures, I assured him. Absolutely, agreed Grandpa Aurelio happily. That night, I slept on the sofa in Grandpa's workshop. It was my last night at the Xavier family home. The next morning, I moved into the dormitory and met my roommates. They were all first-year students, just like me. I found the girls sweet, friendly, and very talkative. I seemed to like my new student life already, I thought. One of the girls was new to the city and wanted to explore. I offered to accompany her. We walked around the city center, ate ice cream, enjoyed each other's company and the fresh air. My new friend was called Elena, like my mother, and I took that as a good sign. Maybe my mother is sending my regards from heaven, I thought. The thought brought a tear to my eye. The next day, I went to see Grandpa Aurelio and told him about my new friends. He was delighted that I had made friends with my roommates. I hope your friendship is strong and warm, said Grandpa. And after a moment's silence, he added, appreciate kindred spirits. They're not that common in life. I nodded gratefully. We worked late into the night, and then I returned to the dormitory by cab. A week later, classes started, and I hardly had time to visit Grandpa Aurelio's workshop. I diligently attended classes, spent long hours in the library, and sometimes didn't return to my room until close to midnight. My favorite teacher was Mr. Matteo Amato. He had recently graduated from university and was very talented and young. His pleasant voice, gentle brown eyes, and shoulder-length curly black hair captivated all the girls. Matteo wore light shirts with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and simple but elegant jeans. I immediately noticed that many girls were looking at him with admiration, and I found myself liking him too. However, I quickly pushed that thought away. Matteo was a teacher, and I was his student. I shouldn't think of him in any other way. Mr. Amato taught sculpture, and one day after class, he unexpectedly asked me to stay a little longer. I'd like to ask you something, miss, he said in his charming voice. Surprised, I nodded and returned to my seat. The professors who were on the admissions committee told me that you showed them photos of your work. They were impressed by the delicacy and grace. I'd like to see something of your creations with my own eyes. I was pleased that our works with my grandfather had caused such a resonance. We created these sculptures and figures together, with my grandfather. I'm going to visit him today and ask permission, I said. Matteo smiled and nodded with such a charming smile that my heart raced. I smiled back and hurried out of the room. The only thing missing was falling in love with him, I thought. After lunch in a cafe, I didn't go home, but went straight to Grandpa Aurelio's workshop to visit him, help him and tell him about Mr. Amato's request. Grandpa Aurelio welcomed me with a cheerful smile. It was clear that he missed me very much. I noticed with sadness that during the time we hadn't seen each other, Grandpa Aurelio had aged a lot. I tried to push the sad thoughts away and began to tell the old man about my studies, how much I enjoyed my classes, how great the university library was, and how nice it was to go for a walk in the park during breaks between classes. Then I told him about Mr. Amato's request. Grandpa Aurelio was pleasantly surprised. "If your teacher wants to see our works, I invite him here. Come together," he said. I nodded and promised to pass on the invitation to the old man. Then we got to work and I didn't leave until late at night. I really didn't want to part with Grandpa Aurelio and promised to call him tomorrow. The next day, I agreed with Mr. Amato that we would go to Grandpa's house on Friday after school. Then I called the old man to let him know. He was delighted with the news and said he would prepare a snack. I was worried because Grandpa was coughing a lot on the phone. "Do you have a cold?" I asked. "A bit of a cough," said the old man. "Let's take some drinks and something nice with us. You shouldn't strain yourself, Grandpa." Friday was only a day away, and I was looking forward to meeting Grandpa Aurelio. I was very worried about his health. Finally, classes ended and Mr. Amato met me in the hallway. "My car's in the parking lot. Can we stop at the supermarket on the way? I'd like to buy some groceries for Grandpa Aurelio as well as drinks and sweets so we can spend some time together." Mateo smiled and nodded. "Sure, no problem," he replied, taking my arm as we walked towards the exit, accompanied by the surprised, curious, and envious looks of other students. "What does he see in her?" I heard the voice of a tall blonde girl who was in second year. It seemed that Mateo heard it too. "Don't listen to what other people say," she whispered, sensing that I was very tense. "No one should have a say in your life." I nodded. We left and Mateo drove me to the parking lot. He stopped in front of a large silver Jeep. "Many people ask how an ordinary university professor can have such an expensive car," smiled Mateo. I remained modestly silent, but this question really interested me. "It's a gift from sponsors," continued the sculptor, opening the door for me. "They really like my work. Last year, I took part in an international exhibition in Italy." I couldn't help but let out a surprised exclamation. "Oh, that's quite an achievement," I exclaimed, sitting down in the passenger seat. "It certainly is," smiled Mateo, getting into the car. "Italy is considered the capital of the arts." I sighed. "I'd like to take part in an exhibition one day," I said dreamily. "I'm sure you have everything in front of you," Mateo replied seriously. We drove through the city streets and I liked how smoothly the car moved. Finally, Mateo stopped at a huge supermarket and parked the Jeep. He quickly got out of the car and managed to open the door for me before I could unfasten my seatbelt. "Thank you," I said shyly. We grabbed a trolley and filled it with various groceries, drinks, and sweets. To my surprise, Mateo didn't let me pay for the shopping. He packed everything into bags and carried them to the parking lot. I followed him empty-handed. I was grateful for my teacher's gesture, but at the same time I felt embarrassed. Finally, we arrived at the Xavier family home and parked nearby. Mateo picked up the bags of groceries while I showed him the way. Grandpa Aurelio took his time opening the door. Did he forget the meeting and go somewhere? I worried. But then the door opened and pale Grandpa appeared on the threshold. "Darling, I'm sorry I didn't open the door before. I haven't felt well since the morning. I took a nap and apparently fell sound asleep." Grandpa really did look unwell. I was very frightened for him, but I tried to hold myself together. Grandpa Aurelio stepped aside to let the guests in. I led Mateo into the workshop and showed him the table where we could put the bags. Grandpa went to the bathroom to freshen up a bit, and when he returned, I introduced him cheerfully to Mr. Amato. "Nice to meet you, young man," said the old man warmly. "Likewise, colleague," replied Mateo. They shook hands, and Grandpa Aurelio began to show his works and tell the story of his creation, while I busied myself with the snacks. When the old man had shown everything in the workshop, the new friends sat down on the sofa. I put the drinks on the table and arranged the sweets, cheeses, and tarts with various fillings on the plates. Mateo praised the works he saw at the workshop. His sculptures and figures are simply magical. The whole world should see them. Grandpa Aurelio smiled, his eyes shining with the joy that every creator feels when praised for their work. The whole world? That's quite a leap, young man. All barriers exist in our minds, replied Mateo wisely, savoring a chocolate treat. Delicious. Miss Dolores has made an excellent choice. My granddaughter is very talented, confirmed Grandpa Aurelio. She has breathed new life into my work. I smiled shyly. I just love working with paints, I said simply. And apparently paints love working with you, Mateo joked. Everyone laughed. You have a great future ahead of you, added Mr. Amato. Grandpa Aurelio took a sip of juice and nodded in satisfaction. I've been telling her that since she was a child. As he said these words, Grandpa Aurelio started coughing a lot. Mateo looked at me. I think it's time for us to go. You need to rest, he suggested gently. Yes, Grandpa, you should lie down. I got up. I'll tidy up here. Grandpa Aurelio nodded gratefully. He really did feel weak. He stood up and was about to shake Mateo's hand when he suddenly jumped to his feet as if an idea had just come to him. Before I go, I'd like to offer you something. In 2 weeks' time, there will be a major art exhibition in the city at our university's cultural center. Would you like to take part? Grandpa Aurelio and I exchanged excited glances. Why not? It's a wonderful opportunity, Grandpa Aurelio replied with emotion. I've never been offered something like this before. That's fantastic. I couldn't contain my excitement. Mr. Amato, thank you so much for this chance. I hugged Grandpa Aurelio and walked him to his room. Grandpa, I'll come back tomorrow and stay the whole weekend. The old man just nodded. He had no strength left after all the pleasant excitement of the evening. I left him to rest and went back to the workshop, where I found Mateo already starting to clear the table. No, let me do it myself, I protested. It's no problem, replied Mateo. We quickly cleaned up and left the house. I hope Grandpa Aurelio gets better soon, I said hopefully as I got into Mateo's car. He's very dear to you, isn't he? Asked Mr. Amato sympathetically. My grandfather is the only close person I have in the world. He gave me as much love as he could. I remained silent for a long time. Mateo understood that I didn't want to talk at that moment and turned on some soft, pleasant music. We listened to beautiful songs the whole way. Mateo dropped me off at the dormitory and thanked me for the wonderful evening. I felt very warm and cozy in your grandfather's workshop. I'm sure your joint works will be much appreciated at the exhibition. They're worth much more than you think. I raised my eyebrows in surprise, but I couldn't doubt the veracity of the young sculptor's words. From that evening on, I began to look forward to the exhibition. During the next visit, Grandpa Aurelio didn't improve. He stayed in bed all day and couldn't start working. Every weekend, I painted the finished figures and looked after Grandpa Aurelio. It was hard to part with him, but the next day I had to attend classes. Go on, dear, said Grandpa. Don't miss school. I'll be fine. If you need help, I'll call Hima. After all, she's still my daughter. I nodded. Grandpa Aurelio brought out a large bag that he had brought from the village. Embroidered on it was a large golden oak tree. Put all the works that will be in the exhibition in here and take them with you. I was surprised, but the exhibition is still 2 weeks away. I can take them later. But Grandpa Aurelio insisted. It's better not to put off until tomorrow what can be done today, he said. I obeyed and selected our best works together for the exhibition. Take care, Grandpa, I said as I said goodbye. Grandpa Aurelio walked me to the door, hugged me tightly, and kissed my forehead. And you, dear, remember that I love you very much. For some reason, my heart squeezed at those words. I waved to Grandpa, picked up my bag, and left. The old man waved at me for a long time, standing on the threshold of the house. The next day, I took the bag with Grandpa's figures to my classes. During the break, I went to the department where Mateo worked and handed him the bag. Here are Grandpa's best works. We've decided that they'll take part in the exhibition. Good. I'll take them to the cultural center, where preparations are already in full swing. I guarantee that all the figures will be safe and sound. I'll take care of it myself. I thanked Mateo and went to my next class. It was an ordinary day of study, and I didn't even suspect that it would turn out to be the saddest day of my life. When I got home, my cell phone rang. My aunt's name appeared on the screen. My heart raced. Hima never called me, and why would she? There could only be one reason. Something had happened to Grandpa Aurelio. I hurried to answer the phone, hearing sobs on the other end. "Auntie, what's happened? Is Grandpa worse?" Hima didn't answer immediately. She couldn't calm down. "Grandpa Aurelio is no longer with us," she finally said. I dropped the phone on the floor. I couldn't believe what I'd heard. The person closest to me had gone. I was shaken. My friend Elena came into the room. "What's wrong, darling? You look so pale," she worried. At that moment, I felt dizzy, my eyes darkening with the unbearable suffering I was experiencing. Elena helped me to lie down and brought me some water. "Grandpa passed away," I whispered, taking a sip. It sounded like my voice belonged to someone else. Elena let out a cry of sympathy and hugged me tightly. "My poor girl," she whispered, knowing how much I loved my grandfather. We held each other for a long time. Then Elena suggested that I lie down. I didn't think I could sleep, but sleep almost instantly enveloped me in its light web, and I sank into it like a soft cloud. I dreamt that I was little again and helping Grandpa Aurelio in the workshop. "Grandpa, you'll never leave me, will you?" "No, I promise," replied the old man seriously. "I'll always be by your side, even when I'm no longer here." Late at night, I woke up in tears. I already missed my grandfather terribly. I got up, drank some water, and went back to sleep. This time, I dreamt that we were walking in the park and feeding the fish in the lake. In the morning, I felt devastated. I didn't go to university and slept all day. In the afternoon, Hima sent a message with the date of the funeral and the address where it would take place. In the evening, someone called me from an unknown number. Reluctantly, I answered the phone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. "Miss Dolores," I heard a familiar voice say. "Yes, it's me," I replied. "You missed my class. I decided to find out what happened. You've always attended every class. Are you sick?" If only, I thought bitterly. I mustered all my strength, but my voice still sounded very weak. My grandfather passed away. There was a pause. Mateo didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry for your loss," he finally whispered, and added, "If you need my help, don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Mr. Amato," I replied quietly. "I won't be in class tomorrow either. I need to go to the funeral." "I can take you if you don't mind," said Mateo. I bit my lip. I really needed someone's support, but how could I accept it from a teacher? "What about your lesson?" I asked. "I'll reschedule it," said Mateo resolutely. I no longer had the strength to resist. "Okay, we need to leave at 8. I'll be at the dorm at 7:55, replied Mateo. With that, we said goodbye. The funeral was very modest. As well as the Xavier family and myself, there was an old friend of my grandfather's who had come especially from the village to say goodbye to Aurelio. I couldn't hold back my tears. Mateo hugged my shoulders, trying to support me in some way. Hima and my cousins looked at us both in surprise, but fortunately, nobody said anything. I couldn't bear to hear cutting remarks from the family I grew up in. However, just as I was getting into the car with Mateo, Aunt Hima approached. "Dolores, I want to ask you something," she said arrogantly. "Yes, Auntie?" I replied. "Yesterday, I was cleaning out Dad's workshop, and I noticed that his favorite pieces were missing. Do you know where they could be? I checked all the cupboards and couldn't find them." There was clear irritation in Hima's voice. "Why do you need them?" I asked in surprise. "I thought they could be sold on the market," she replied directly. "You see, there were a lot of funeral expenses and everything." I was about to reply when Mateo intervened in the conversation. "That's not acceptable. These pieces have high artistic value and you just want to take them to the market?" He protested. Hima glared at him. "And who are you to decide what I should do?" "I'm a university professor," Mateo replied with dignity. "And I know a thing or two about these matters." "So you contacted a professor?" Hima turned to me. "I never thought you could do that. I've always taught her to be modest and decent." I blushed and wanted to disappear. I was already feeling very bad, and now this unpleasant conversation. I was afraid that, after Hima's words, Mateo would stop talking to me. I was about to justify myself, but Mateo wouldn't let me. "That's none of your business," he interrupted. "If you've already said everything you wanted to, then please excuse us." Hima hesitated for a moment, but that was enough for Mateo to lead me away, open the car door, and put me in. As he turned the car around, he noticed Hima giving him an angry look. "She's a thief," he suddenly exclaimed. "I'm going to sue her for stealing Dad's statues." Mateo stopped. "Those are the joint works of grandfather and granddaughter. All the creations now belong to Dolores, and you'll have to accept that." With those words, he got into the car and drove off, leaving Hima standing by the side of the road with her mouth open in indignation. Mateo and I remained silent for a long time. This time, Mateo didn't turn on the music. Apparently, he wanted to talk about what had happened. "Did this woman raise you instead of your mother?" he asked cautiously. I bit my lip and nodded silently. "Now I understand why you considered your grandfather to be the only person close to you. That woman—" Mateo didn't continue, just frowned in disgust. "I feel so ashamed of my aunt," I whispered. "Why? For what she said about us?" Mateo briefly took his eyes off the road and looked at me. "Maybe it looks that way from the outside, but my intentions are pure. I never thought anything of it, although I certainly find you attractive." I blushed. "Oh, don't think I usually woo my students. In fact, this is a first for me. I liked you from the first moment, your fragility and graceful features. When I saw you for the first time, I wanted to take care of you, to protect you from the whole world." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Had I evoked such feelings in Mateo? "But if it's uncomfortable for you to hear all this, I won't say any more. I'll never cross the line and put you in an uncomfortable position. After all, I'm a teacher and you're my student. But it won't always be like this. What do you think? Do I have a chance?" I was so surprised that I didn't know what to say. "You attract me too, Mr. Amato. But my grandfather said I should focus on my studies first." Mateo looked at me again. "Yes, I understand and I won't insist. Can we be friends?" I nodded. It would be better for everyone. Our relationship would be too compromising. "I'm so sorry my grandfather didn't live to see the exhibition," I sighed, tears streaming down my face. "Me too," echoed Mateo. "He was a wonderful man with golden hands. What a shame I didn't meet him before," I sobbed. We said no more. 2 weeks later, the exhibition took place. Grandpa Aurelio's and my works really impressed the visitors and cultural figures, earning us an honorary certificate. In addition, a gray-haired man approached me and asked about my inspiration for creativity. I marveled at his foreign accent and replied that the muse came to me as soon as I picked up a brush and paint. "Oh, that's wonderful," laughed the man. Then he leaned over slightly and handed me a business card. "Alessandro Ricci," the beautiful gold lettering proclaimed. "Sculptor. Do you also work with sculpture?" I asked. Alessandro nodded. "Yes, and I've been quite successful at it. I have my own school in Italy. Every year we hold our own exhibition, which is attended by professionals from all over the world. Perhaps you'd be interested in taking part." I couldn't believe my ears. I was being invited to an exhibition in Italy? "When?" I dared to ask. "Next week already. You'll have enough time to pack your items and pack your suitcase," said the Italian cheerfully. "We'll cover your travel and accommodation expenses." I had no choice but to smile in response. "Of course, I accept. By the way, we've also invited a professor from your university, Mr. Amato. Do you know him?" I nodded happily. "So Mateo will be there too? What a magician." After the conversation with Alessandro, I found the young sculptor and shared the great news with him. "I never doubted your talent," he exclaimed, barely restraining himself from hugging me. Mateo and I spent 3 wonderful days in Italy. It was my first trip, and I enjoyed everything immensely. We were able to visit an art gallery, a museum, and enjoy the incredible Italian cuisine. When we got back from Italy, I learned something terrible from the news. The Xavier family home, where I grew up, and where Grandpa Aurelio's workshop was located, had burnt down completely. It was the biggest fire in the city's history. The report showed Hima, who had lost everything. She never trusted banks and kept all her money at home. What's more, the house wasn't insured. Hima and her adult children didn't work, used to the fact that Mom would always feed them. so the family was left with no means of survival. A friend of theirs donated an old van. It was parked next to the rubbish dumps, and now the family slept there. Compassionate neighbors shared clothes and blankets with them and brought food. The older brothers urgently started looking for work, but they weren't having much luck. The family was in a desperate situation. "We rummaged through the garbage cans every day looking for good things," admitted Hima, distraught. When I heard the news, I immediately called Mateo and told him everything. He shrugged and said that I couldn't help in any way. "But you live on scholarships," he reasoned. "But I have Grandpa's statues. If I sell them and give the money to Auntie, she'll be able to buy a new house and improve the family's situation," I objected. Mateo looked at me with astonishment. "Are you willing to sacrifice the most precious thing to these people? You said yourself that they never valued you for anything." I nodded, but I couldn't calm down. "They're still my family," I said calmly. Mateo ran a hand through his hair. "Of course, it's entirely up to you." I decided it was the right thing to do. I kept Grandpa's favorite piece for myself, a mythical Pegasus with rainbow wings, whose painting I was particularly proud of. I took the rest of the pieces to a collector recommended by Mateo, who paid a high price for my grandfather's exclusive works. I put the money in Grandpa's bag and left a note inside. "I hope these funds will help you." I arrived early in the morning at the place where the Xavier family house used to be and stood by the fence for a while. Then I noticed the van where Aunt Hima now lived. Not wanting to meet anyone from the Xavier family in person, and remembering the words about rummaging through garbage, I put my bag near the garbage can. I knocked hard on the van door and quickly drove away down the street. I didn't hear the van door open and Hima appear on the threshold. Without seeing anyone, she was about to close the door when she noticed the bag with the embroidered golden oak next to the garbage can. Hima walked over and picked up the bag. "This is Dad's bag," she said aloud. "But how did it get here?" Hima put the bag on the floor, unzipped it, and stared, covering her mouth with her hand. "Where did this money come from?" echoed in her mind. She noticed the note and, after reading it, realized that I had been there. Hima took the bag into the van and sat down on an old chair. She put the bag at her feet and stared at the notes for a long time. "So Dolores sold her father's figurines and gave the money to us. But why? Did she regret it? And this after calling her a thief?" He shook his head in bewilderment. "How could I have acted like that?" "The girl has a heart of gold," he whispered quietly, so as not to wake the family. Unexpectedly, tears streamed down the woman's cheeks, and her hardened heart softened a little. I continued to attend classes, but I missed working in the workshop I had been used to since childhood. I asked Mateo for permission to go to his workshop when there were higher education classes. He gladly granted me this permission. I had the opportunity to continue Grandpa Aurelio's work. However, I wasn't a skilled sculptor and soon turned to painting. My paintings gained attention and I was invited to exhibitions. Soon, my name became known throughout the city. The first academic year was rapidly coming to an end. I was very busy. All my time was dedicated to preparing for exams and tests. Finally, all that was behind me and I was looking forward to the vacations. My friend Elena suggested we go to the coast where her grandmother lived, and I happily accepted. A few days before my departure, Mateo called me to make an appointment. "I have some news for you," he said mysteriously. We met in the park and sat on a bench near the fountain. "So, what did you want to tell me?" I asked. I was wearing the same pink dress my grandfather had given me. Mateo admired me. The night was warm. The fountain murmured softly, as if whispering words of love. Stars lit up one by one in the sky. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers mixed with my perfume. Mateo leaned towards me and ran his hand through my hair. "I've decided to leave university," he said. "Next year, you'll have a new sculpture teacher." Really? I was disappointed. I couldn't imagine my life without Mateo Amato. "Yes, really," nodded the young man. "I've decided to devote all my time to creativity. I have the chance to make a good living from it, so why not?" I lowered my head. I didn't want to lose someone close to me, but I knew that life doesn't always go the way we want. "So we won't be seeing each other anymore?" I asked. "Yes. I won't be your teacher anymore. smiled Matteo. Then, after a pause, he added, "But I really want to be your boyfriend if you don't mind." Surprised, I didn't immediately realize what I had heard. Then I laughed. "I hope you're not giving up because of me," I clarified. Matteo smiled mischievously and leaned a little closer. "Exactly for that reason," he confessed. Having said that, Matteo gently touched my lips and I kissed him back. Somewhere, a street musician was playing a beautiful melody on his violin, and above our heads, the golden stars were shining even brighter.